For thousands of years, humans have noted the eccentric dances of the bees, but no one had ever looked at them with the kind of respect that assumed there was a reason to their dancing.
In the 1920s, a scientist watched a bee return to its hive and do something no one could explain. It didn't rest. It didn't eat. It started dancing.
Von Frisch knew that the other bees had not followed the marked bee to the feeding place. So how did the painted bee reveal the exact location of the sugar water with such precision?
That strange movement would later reveal one of the most sophisticated communication systems ever discovered in nature, one so precise that modern AI is still uncovering new layers today. From vibrating messages and sound signals to hive-wide votes with no leader in charge, this is the story of how bees quietly built one of the smartest societies on Earth. The hidden bee language. Back in the 1920s, an Austrian scientist named Karl von Frisch noticed something that didn't fit with what anyone thought they knew about honeybees. When forager bees returned to the hive carrying nectar, they didn't simply hand it off and disappear back into the crowd. Instead, they began moving in a very deliberate way, tracing a repeated figure-8 pattern across the honeycomb. At first glance, it looked almost random, but it happened too consistently to be meaningless. Von Frisch became convinced that this movement wasn't accidental, so he decided to test it. He marked individual bees with paint and set up artificial food sources at precise locations around the hive, changing their distance and direction each time. What he found completely changed how we understand insect behavior. The dance wasn't decoration, it was actually information. Bees that discovered a rich food source returned to the hive and performed this movement with remarkable precision. The angle of the straight waggle portion pointed toward the food's direction, measured relative to the position of the sun. The length of time the bee waggled indicated how far away the food was. Short runs meant nearby flowers. Longer runs pointed to locations much farther out. Every part of the movement carried meaning. Over time, repeated experiments confirmed the same result. Bees were sharing exact locations with their hive mates, allowing them to travel miles and arrive at the same spot with stunning accuracy. This discovery was so groundbreaking that it eventually earned von Frisch a share of the 1973 Nobel Prize, firmly proving that bees use a structured system to communicate spatial information. But this raised a much bigger question. Was this waggle dance really the full story? Or was it just the surface of something far more complex? Decades later, with the rise of computers and artificial intelligence, scientists began to look at these dances in ways the human eye never could. Machine learning systems started tracking every movement, every correction, every subtle adjustment, revealing that bees weren't just following a rigid script, but fine-tuning their messages with mind-blowing precision. Before we get there, though, we need to understand the waggle dance itself, because this simple-looking movement turns out to be one of the most sophisticated communication systems ever discovered in the natural world. As it turns out, the waggle dance Karl von Frisch uncovered works less like a simple signal and more like a living map. A map that nestmates absorb and act on almost instantly. But this isn't a one-way message. What's actually happening inside the hive is closer to a collective decision-making process, where the entire colony weighs multiple food options at once. It all begins with scout bees. These scouts fan out across the landscape searching for rich nectar sources. When one of them finds a promising location, she returns to the hive and starts her figure-8 dance, precisely aligned to the sun's position as it would appear from the hive entrance. The direction of her straight waggle run points toward the food, while the length of that run acts like a measuring stick. Each second of waggling corresponds to hundreds of meters flown. Researchers have tested this repeatedly by moving feeders to different distances and angles. Time after time, the recruited bees followed the path encoded in the dance, even when the food source was far beyond the hive and completely out of sight. And that's where things get truly remarkable. Inside the hive, it's almost entirely dark. The bees aren't watching the dance at all. Vision plays no role here. Instead, the message travels through vibration and sound. As the scout dances, she sends low-frequency vibrations, around 12 cycles per second, rippling through the wax like the surface of a drum. Nestmates detect these signals through their legs, feeling the movement rather than seeing it. On top of that, the dancer produces rapid pulse bursts between 200 and 300 cycles per second, using wing beats and subtle abdomen movements. These higher frequency signals carry additional details, sharpening the message about distance and urgency. Together, movement, vibration, and sound form a layered multi-sensory signal. The bees aren't just following a dance. They're decoding a precise set of instructions that allows them to leave the hive and fly directly to the same target. What looks like a simple wiggle is actually a highly tuned communication system, operating flawlessly in complete darkness. But once you realize that bees can share precise directions in total darkness, a bigger question follows. How does that message actually move through the hive? The answer lies not in a single signal, but in an entire sensory system working at once. The shakes and pulses of the waggle dance rely on a full set of finely tuned body tools, forming a highly advanced multimodal communication network in which every vibration carries meaning. One of the most remarkable components of this system is Johnston's organ, located at the base of each antenna. This structure contains roughly 300 to 320 tiny sensory units, known as scolopidia, capable of detecting air vibrations in the range of 265 to 350 cycles per second by sensing subtle movements of the antenna tip. When a dancing bee beats her wings or contracts her abdomen, she pushes surrounding air into motion. Nearby bees angle their antennae toward her, allowing Johnston's organ to capture these airborne signals with precision. At the same time, sound alone isn't enough. Bees also rely on physical vibrations traveling through the honeycomb itself. Using subgenual organs embedded in the tibia of their legs, nestmates detect low-frequency rumbles that move through the wax like waves along a solid surface. These organs pick up the dancer's steps, group hums, and rhythmic pulses, allowing bees to feel the message even when visual cues are completely absent. The hive's structure further amplifies this system. The hexagonal cells of the honeycomb form a dense, interconnected grid that efficiently channels vibrations, spreading signals across the comb, much like a natural speaker system. Together, air movement, solid-borne vibrations, and specialized sensory organs create a communication network that functions flawlessly in darkness, ensuring that no crucial message is lost inside the hive. AI's role in decoding the whispers. With bees relying on their antennae and leg sensors to detect vibrations and sounds throughout the hive, scientists faced a challenge. To analyze this communication in detail, the human eye and ear simply weren't enough. The movements were too fast, the signals too subtle, and the hive far too noisy. That's why researchers turned to modern computing to decode how bees communicate with one another. Today, machine learning systems can automatically detect and interpret waggle dances with impressive accuracy, reaching success rates of over 90%. These systems use specialized filters to scan video footage frame by frame, identifying waggle runs by their rapid side-to-side body movements. Once flagged, those clips are passed into neural networks trained to separate real dances from random motion. This technology allows researchers to extract direction and distance data from thousands of dances across a single day, creating detailed maps of where bees are being sent. The neural networks are precise enough to lock onto a single bee within a dense crowd and track her movement frame by frame without losing her, revealing not only who is dancing, but also which bees pause to observe and follow. Movement tracking is only part of a bigger picture. These AI systems can also isolate individual sound signals from the constant hum inside the hive. This challenge, known as the cocktail party puzzle, involves breaking overlapping sound waves into distinct pulse patterns and matching them to specific bees. Using this method, the system can separate waggle signals from queen piping, food calls, and other background noise, even when they occur simultaneously. When researchers analyze the decoded waggle dances, the results are striking. The average directional error is just a few degrees, around -3 degrees, with only a small range of variation. When multiple dances are averaged together, the accuracy becomes precise enough to guide bees directly to feeding locations. All of this confirms that bee communication is not random or instinctive noise. It follows consistent rules, carries measurable information, and supports collective decision-making, revealing a system that is far more organized and deliberate than it appears on the surface. The idea that animals might communicate in structured ways has reshaped how scientists approach behavior and intelligence. In response, several research teams have emerged with a shared goal: decoding animal communication as if it were a language waiting to be understood. One of the most ambitious efforts in this space is the Earth Species Project. Founded in 2017 by technologists Asa Raskin and Britt Selvatel, the project set out to apply artificial intelligence to one of biology's hardest problems: making sense of non-human communication. To do this, the team built specialized computational tools designed specifically to analyze animal sounds at a scale no human researcher could manage alone. One of their most significant breakthroughs came with the development of Nature LM Audio, the first large-scale sound language model trained entirely on animal vocalizations. The model was fed millions of recordings collected from environments ranging from dense rainforests to the open ocean. Within this vast data set, the system began identifying recurring acoustic patterns that consistently appeared in specific contexts, such as warning signals, mating calls, or coordination behaviors. To expand both the quality and diversity of the data, the Earth Species Project partnered with more than 40 biologists working across the globe. Their research spanned university labs analyzing whale vocalizations off the coast of California, to field studies in Africa focused on elephant rumbles. These collaborations provided the volume and ecological variety needed to train neural networks capable of learning communication structures across species. The result was an AI system often compared to a language model for animals, one that can map patterns, infer rules, and identify how information is structured and transmitted. In controlled experiments, researchers tested this system by playing modified versions of real animal calls back to members of the same species. By observing how animals responded to these altered sounds, scientists were able to infer what specific signals likely meant in natural settings. This approach has direct implications for understanding bees as well. By analyzing which vibration patterns trigger food collection, movement, or nest changes, researchers can begin to connect specific pulse trains to real behavioral outcomes. Is it really a language? As artificial intelligence continues to decode what's happening inside the hive, a deeper question emerges. Does bee communication truly qualify as a language, or is it simply a collection of signals? Unlike human language, the waggle dance does not rely on flexible word order. In human speech, changing the sequence of words can completely reverse the meaning. Bees don't have that kind of grammatical freedom. Their system is fixed. The angle of the dance always represents direction, and the duration always represents distance, regardless of which bee is dancing or when the dance occurs. A faster waggle signals a nearby food source, while a longer, slower run points to a distant one. This consistency suggests more than a simple reflex. It functions like a set of mathematical rules that every bee follows, allowing information to remain stable across the entire colony. Now this raises another question. How do bees learn to dance so precisely? Yale neuroscientist and language expert Stephen Anderson argued that the waggle dance must be entirely hardwired. His reasoning was based on early observations, suggesting that young bees performed accurate dances without any visible training, implying the behavior was fully encoded in their genes. That idea, however, was challenged by new laboratory studies published in 2023. When researchers closely tracked young bees, they found that beginners did not perform perfect dances at all. Early waggle runs were often inaccurate, with large errors in both angle and distance. Over time, and after observing experienced dancers inside the hive, those errors steadily decreased. Within days, The young bees adjusted their movements and began matching the precision of older foragers. This shift revealed something important. The waggle dance is refined through social learning. Bees watch, adjust, and improve, tuning their movements based on feedback from the colony. We know that waggle dances are used to promote food sources. But what happens when different scouts advertise competing options? Just like in human groups, agreement isn't guaranteed. Even in a colony known for coordination and efficiency, conflicts can emerge, and this is where stop signals come into play. Stop signals act as the hive's built-in braking system. They allow scouts to interrupt or suppress dances that promote poor or risky choices. These signals are delivered as brief, targeted bursts from other scouts that have identified serious flaws in a proposed location. The issue might be a scarce food source, an unsafe nest site, or structural problems like a leaky cavity. What makes this process especially striking is how directly the signal is delivered. Instead of relying on subtle cues, a bee delivers a stop signal through physical contact. The scout rams her head into the side of the dancing bee while producing a short, high-pitched vibration at around 320 cycles per second. This sharp signal cuts through the hive's constant background hum and immediately disrupts the dance. This behavior was first documented by Cornell entomologist Thomas Seeley, who spent decades observing bee swarms, particularly during nest site selection. While studying swarms clustered in apple trees, he noticed that scouts promoting weaker nest options were often interrupted by rivals using these forceful signals. To study the process in detail, Seeley and his team marked individual bees with paint and placed sensitive microphones inside experimental hives. This setup allowed them to capture the exact mechanics of a stop signal. The signaling bee lunges forward with a rigid posture, wings pressed tightly against her body, while her flight muscles generate a brief 320 Hz pulse. Upon receiving the signal, the dancer abruptly halts her figure-8 pattern. In many cases, this interruption lasts for several minutes. During that time, fewer recruits are drawn to the suppressed option, allowing stronger and more viable alternatives to gain support. In effect, stop signals function as a quality control system, filtering out weaker proposals before they can mislead the colony. But stop signals don't always end the disagreement. Cross-inhibition. When a stop signal attempts to shut down a competing proposal, the response isn't always passive. In many cases, it sparks direct resistance, escalating into a physical back and forth among scouts promoting rival nest sites. Bees supporting different options begin headbutting one another, each trying to weaken the opposing signal and push their own choice forward. As this conflict unfolds, something more strategic emerges. Scouts reduce stop signals directed at dancers from their own group while continuing to suppress rivals. This behavior, known as cross-inhibition, allows one option to gain strength by selectively weakening the opposition without damaging its own support. Thomas Seeley and Kirk Viescher documented this process in their 2012 research, showing that these repeated stop signals function much like inhibitory signals in the brain. Just as neurons send pulses that suppress competing activity until one signal dominates, bee scouts exchange stop signals until the strongest option prevails, without any central authority directing the outcome. Through this process, deadlocks are eventually broken. What emerges is a collective decision shaped by competition and restraint, allowing the colony to converge on a single, reliable nest site through decentralized control. While cross-inhibition intensifies debate among rival scouts, the final decision unfolds at the scale of the entire swarm, and it closely resembles a town hall vote, with one crucial difference: no leader is presiding over it. When a colony prepares to split in spring, around 10,000 bees gather into a dense cluster, often hanging from a tree branch. From that cluster, several hundred scout bees disperse in all directions, sometimes traveling more than a mile to search for a suitable new home. Each scout evaluates potential nest sites independently, inspecting tree hollows and crevices, while measuring key factors such as entrance size, height above the ground, internal volume, and dryness. Every detail matters because the colony's survival depends on choosing a space that can safely house the queen and support future generations. When a scout finds a promising location, she returns to the swarm and begins advertising it through waggle dances. As multiple scouts promote different sites, competition builds. This phase can last for half an hour or more, with dances intensifying and rival options rising and falling in popularity. Through years of fieldwork in apple orchards, Thomas Seeley discovered that high-quality nest sites consistently attract between 50 and 100 committed dancers. Once that threshold is reached, the swarm reaches a tipping point. Much like an election, the option, with sufficient support, becomes the collective choice. This process reveals something striking. No ruler is required for the colony to function. There is no chain of command, no central authority, and no single bee with greater influence than the rest. Every scout has equal weight, and the outcome depends entirely on the accumulation of support. Even the queen plays no role in the decision. Despite her title, she does not evaluate sites, signal preferences, or guide the swarm. She remains passive throughout the process and simply follows once a consensus has formed, moving with the rest of the colony to the chosen location. Seeley documented this leaderless system in his 2010 book, Honeybee Democracy, drawing parallels to human voting systems such as single transferable voting. As weaker options lose support, scouts shift their backing toward stronger choices, allowing the colony to abandon acceptable sites in favor of truly optimal ones. Stop signals and repeated inspections help prevent poor decisions, all without external control or intervention. Experiments tracking marked scouts confirmed the effectiveness of this system. Even when faced with difficult choices, swarms reached decisions quickly and selected the best available nest more than 80% of the time. These outcomes weren't driven by dominance or authority, but by shared rules and collective evaluation. What emerges is a form of intelligence without leadership, where simple behaviors, repeated across thousands of individuals, combine into a decision-making system that is both resilient and remarkably accurate. The waggle drift phenomenon. As machine learning systems examined hive footage in greater detail, researchers uncovered a subtle but powerful pattern in how waggle dancers move, one that quietly transforms apparent chaos into order on the crowded comb. This behavior, known as waggle drift, allows bees to organize their messages without any conscious coordination. In a 2023 study, scientists analyzed hours of high-speed video using computer models that tracked thousands of waggle runs frame by frame. They noticed that dancers do not return to the same starting point after each figure-8 loop. Instead, after every waggle run, the bee shifts slightly forward, by about 0.8 millimeters on average, in the same direction her body points during the straight waggle phase. On its own, the movement is almost imperceptible. But over the course of 20 to 30 repeated runs, this small shift accumulates. The result is a gradual outward spread of dancers across the comb, with each bee drifting in the direction of the location she is advertising. Dances pointing north slowly migrate toward the north side of the dance floor, while south-pointing dances drift in the opposite direction. Follower bees respond to this spatial sorting. As they move across the comb, they naturally encounter clusters of dances that all point toward similar locations outside the hive. This allows a single observer to sample several related dances and leave with a clearer, more reliable sense of where to fly, and just as importantly, where not to. Without this drift, dances advertising distant and unrelated locations would overlap, creating confusion in an already crowded space. Instead, the comb becomes divided into distinct regions, each corresponding to a real area in the landscape. This spatial organization makes navigation easier, especially for inexperienced foragers attempting their first flights. The study showed that waggle drift matches real-world bee behavior closely, helping explain why bees tend to revisit the same productive areas. As attention concentrates around successful locations, those spots attract even more recruits, reinforcing a feedback loop where good options grow stronger simply through collective focus. What appears to be a minor physical adjustment turns out to be another quiet rule that helps the hive manage information efficiently, without signals, supervision, or centralized control. Drift and equal voting sharpen the hive's decision-making, but when researchers compare different bee species, another pattern emerges. The waggle language itself adapts to local conditions. Much like human dialects, different honeybee species use distance signals tuned to how far they typically travel in search of food. A 2020 study published in Proceedings of the Royal Society examined this variation across several Asian honeybee species living in the same regions of India, including the eastern honeybee, Apis carana, the dwarf honeybee, Apis florea, and the giant honeybee, Apis dorsata. Researchers placed feeders at fixed distances from each species' nests and analyzed how their waggle dances encoded the same travel lengths. The differences were striking. Apis carana, which usually forages within about 1 kilometer of the hive, used the steepest distance code. Small changes in waggle duration translated into clear distinctions for nearby food sources. Apis florea, with a typical foraging range of roughly 2.5 kilometers, showed an intermediate pattern. Apis dorsata, capable of flying 3 kilometers or more, used the shallowest code, spreading shorter waggle times across longer distances. Field observations of natural flower dances confirmed the same trend. Carana dances clustered around nearby blooms, Florea signals pointed to mid-range patches, and dorsata dances directed bees toward distant fields. The pattern remained consistent when researchers compared data from other regions, including England, Botswana, and Japan. These findings show that evolution has shaped waggle dialects to balance precision with range. Steep distance codes work best when accuracy matters most, where a small error could mean missing the target entirely. Flatter codes, on the other hand, allow long-distance foragers to compress large travel ranges into brief dances, preventing the comb from being overwhelmed by slow, extended waggle runs. This built-in flexibility reveals that bee communication is not fixed or universal. It adjusts to ecological demands, much like human language shifts across environments and needs. And once again, it does so without any central planner, emerging naturally over generations as colonies refine the same simple rules for local success. The result is a system that remains efficient, adaptable, and leaderless, yet capable of coordinating thousands of individuals with remarkable precision. What are your thoughts about it? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. Also, ring the bell icon so you won't miss any of our new videos. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.